Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean. We've got a big episode for you today with Major League Baseball season opening up. Already an awful injury for the Cubs. Stanley Cup playoffs starting, and the NFL draft just a couple of short weeks away. All of this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. But first, as always, we'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league team of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today for family-friendly, affordable prices. Only 2 home games left in the regular season. The first is April 15th, tax day. The second is April 16th. So it'll be against Grand Rapids and Milwaukee. Both games at 7 p.m. at the beautiful BMO Harris Bank Center in lovely Rockford, Illinois. Only not even 90 minutes from the city limits. Fun for the whole family. Check them out at icehogs.com. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. I am going to jump into baseball. Baseball. First of all, because Major League season started already, which is awesome. Love baseball, love the excitement, and it's crazy because you get so hyped up about Major League Baseball's opening day. It's kind of like a holiday, but the season is so long. It's like a marathon. So it's funny that you get so excited about it, whereas I don't know. I don't get that excited about the first game of the NFL season. I feel like you need time to ease into that. But it should be inverse because you need to jump right into the NFL. It's just only 16 games. But whatever. I want to talk about, we never do this, is let's start with the White Sox. White Sox are off to a great start, and I feel like I'm owed a little bit of credit from people that razzed me for last season saying I thought the White Sox were going to be fairly decent because I said it again this year, and people are like, wow, this team, they didn't add enough superstars and they were so bad last year and blah blah blah. I really think that the White Sox had a decent ball club last year, and it was like everything that could go wrong. Everybody had a career worst season. Things like that don't happen. It was just an all around rough season. Then you started it off bad with the whole Adam LaRoche debacle with his kid in the clubhouse, but honestly, it's you've made good moves. You replaced poor third baseman with a pretty good third baseman. You've improved your defense and your offense. You've got some protection around Jose Abreu. You've actually got a decent team here, and the record is starting to show it. I mean, sure, you haven't played any superstar teams yet, but still, you're only a half game out of first place. Granted, first week of the season, but still, that's always something you can build on, especially considering that your ace, Chris Sale, hasn't had a spectacular start yet. He's gotten 2 wins, but it's been 2 subpar Chris Sale performances. You figure once he gets into his ace mode, you're going to be that much better. Jose Abreu is off to a great start with 2 home runs already in 6 games. Frazier's got 2 home runs in 6 games. Jimmy Rollins is already taking a leadership role and correcting people on some of the mistakes that they've made. You've got like veteran leadership stepping up, and that's positive. I mean, sure, J-Roll isn't even batting his weight, but it's not so much his bat that's going to be what what makes him an important part of this team. It's going to be his fielding, and it's going to be his veteran leadership, and he's already proven that. So, is this team going to? Are they going to the World Series playoffs, baseball playoffs? Maybe, but what they are going to be doing is they're going to compete in a very wide open division, and that's all you can ask for is compete within your division. And it's not a pushover division. It's just that it's a bunch of teams that have the potential to be. It's basically a potential division. You've got Kansas City, who's already shown what they can do because they've been to the last 2 World Series and won the last one, but they've lost some key pieces. Can they continue this? Detroit is old. Can they keep people healthy? You've got Cleveland, who has a great starting rotation, but can they put it all together in a full team? You've got the White Sox, who've got great pitching and some good hitters, but can they actually make that into a good team? And Minnesota is a young ball club. So there's a lot of question marks, and you're going to find out who has the answers. It's nice to see that the White Sox are just off to a good start here. I don't have too much to say because I have been so busy watching Cubs and Blackhawks games. I've only caught a couple innings here and there of the White Sox, but I'm going to transition right over to the Cubs. A lot of things that I wanted to talk about with the Cubs, but there's one thing that's absolutely going to trump all of that, and it's going to lead into some of my other points, is the Kyle Schwarber injury. We all knew that Kyle Schwarber is a great hitter, but he was a liability out in the outfield, and you had pretty much a worst case scenario with him as possible. Is he had a collision trying to run down a ball. I don't know if they didn't hear each other call it off or nobody called off, but you had Dexter Fowler, who is not the best fielding center fielder, and a very poor left fielding Kyle Schwarber, both going for the ball, collision, and you have Kyle Schwarber with 2 torn ligaments in his knee. He's done for the season, and it's over. I keep hearing a lot of people, including many well-recognized sportscasters, that are saying it's this. They basically turn into Chicken Little with the sky is falling. Oh my God, the Cubs have no chance now, no chance. I think that's really silly to say. You're saying that without a guy who's a bad fielder, who's only played roughly half of a season in Major League Baseball, is the one piece that's going to keep you from winning a World Series. If that's the case, then the Cubs didn't have a good team to begin with. If all of your hopes are riding on basically a guy starting his first full season, he's basically a rookie, and your hopes and dreams of World Series title are riding on this guy, I'm sorry. It's a really big blow because he's a great on-base guy and probably has the biggest power bat in the lineup, but this is a really good lineup. It's a really good lineup, and you've got other options to put in there. You were already talking about how he had 4 outfielders, and what were you going to do with Soler? Well, you've got your answer is you're going to have to put Soler in at left field. Or if in cases like today, where you're going to have to put in Tommy La Stella at third base, and you move Chris Bryant to the outfield. You've got options. You really do. You've got so many hitters, and you've got Javi Baez coming back, who, granted, you don't know what you're going to have from him, but he was, for a while, your top prospect in the minor leagues, and he was the first one of the young kids to come up. And he's got a lot of potential there too. So you've got room here, and you've already shown this offense has been like a juggernaut. They've been steamrolling people, and they steamrolled Zach Greinke. They've steamrolled everybody. Look at the numbers that they've put up. It is not just with the home runs that they're doing, but they're getting guys on base, and they're driving them home the old-fashioned way. sure, it'd be nice to have a guy that could just put one in the on Waveland Avenue, but that's missing Kyle Schwarber is going to make things a little tougher, but it damn sure doesn't mean that this team isn't a good team, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to have a chance at the World Series, because that's the fact, is this team is really good. You want to talk about one of the big questions was, what if Jake Arrieta doesn't look good coming back? And he pitched a lights out game the first game of the season, and he's pitching today with the second game of the season, and had gave up a couple home runs. That's not his usual, but he looked good other than that. I mean, this is a team that was a dark horse for the division title. He hit one of the home runs was hit by an MVP candidate in Goldschmidt. So he's looked great. Lester's looked great. Hamill looked good. Other than maybe one inning or 2 innings, is you had Hendricks looks good, and Lackey got lit up in the first 3 innings that he pitched. But after that, if you just look at that, he settled right in. It was maybe that's nerves, maybe that's the first start of the season, maybe he just, I don't know. But you're getting some good performances in your pitching. And you've got the offense clicking with everybody getting on base and working the pitch counts, and getting the starting pitcher out of there and into the bullpen, and it's phenomenal. And like I said, it's not just the home runs. These guys are getting singles and doubles and driving in runs the old-fashioned way. And this is, with Matt Caesar coming in looking good, it's ridiculous. And I know this is a little bit premature. This is only a week into the season, but this has to feel good, because with being a team that had such a big target on their back coming into this season, it's easy that they could have, with such a young team and with such a big target, that they could have easily just crumbled right off the bat. But they're coming out there and they're battling away and winning ball games. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is come trade deadline, if there's a piece you need, you could move package in there, including Soler or Baez or any number of the minor leaguers, and that's starting to change the form of what the trade would be, because I originally was suspecting it might be pitching help, but now it could be bringing in a veteran outfielder for the second half run if you need to. If you're not getting consistency in that left field spot, you could always bring in a veteran left fielder. I guess that's really all we could talk about. I don't want to make too much about the first week of the season. It's not even the first full week yet. I guess today would be wrapping up the first full week, but it's really nice to be in baseball. It's really nice to see both teams get off to good starts and start to show that confidence that they have, to show that for the Cubs that it wasn't a fluke last year and that they're making the right moves. And for the White Sox, that last year was a fluke, and that the bats that they brought in are the right ones. And you have, even you bring in the right bats, things are going well, and you're getting off to a good start. That's positive. It's got to be good for Robin Ventura's, boost of confidence for what he's doing. It's got to be good for the front office. It's got to be good for the players on the field. You already knew that you were going to have a competitive pitching staff for the first 3 of the rotation with Quintana, Rodon, and Sale. But like we talked about before, is the big question mark is what's going to happen in those last 2 spots. And you had Matt Latos come in and just absolutely pitch a beast of a game, which was great for him, because it's sure, it's a 1-game sampling, and we keep going back to that. It's a small sample size, but he's going back to that stuff he had from like 2-3 years ago, where he was a great pitcher. And if he can continue that, and his stuff wasn't unhittable, what it was is he switched speeds, switched stuff up, and kept hitters off balance and was throwing strikes. If he can keep doing that, it's not like he needed to have his A-game stuff. It just he was throwing strikes and he was keeping hitters off balance. The one chink in that armor is John Danks looked terrible. Luckily, you have a few options in the minors, but hopefully that the White Sox can maybe skip a start on his end or do some other things to keep this momentum going until they're able to figure out what they want to do. If they want to bring up somebody from the AAA, or if they want to let John Danks ride it out and hopefully get better. We shall see. I guess I want to talk about the Bulls. They're not officially out of the playoffs yet, but for all intents and purposes they are. They have absolutely no room for anything to go wrong if they're to make the playoffs. They have to win out every single one of the rest of their games, and they need Indiana to lose every single one of their games. They already are mathematically, they can't beat Detroit. The best they could do is tie Detroit, and Detroit holds the tiebreaker. So their only hope is to catch Indiana. So Indiana would need to lose every single one of their games for the rest of the season, and the Bulls would need to win every single one of their games. So tonight, facing a mediocre team in Brooklyn, I really feel that the Indiana is going to win that game and knock the Bulls out of the playoffs. For all intents and purposes, the Bulls have to be considered out of the playoffs. You've got, and they did it in such poor fashion. When you looked against the other night, you had Paul Gasol get absolutely whipped by Zach Randolph, and that's just got to be embarrassing. People talk about Paul Gasol like he's a Hall of Famer and he is an all-star. You can't get beat that bad by Zach Randolph. You've got Jimmy Butler, what he put up 5 points. You just have this whole team collapse. And then you have things like Paul Gasol saying this team doesn't play with heart. And it's so incredibly frustrating because Paul Gasol is one of the ones that leads the charge on not having heart. It's like Paul Gasol does not have a mirror anywhere in his life. Look at yourself, Paul. You're one of the main culprits in this team. I know this sounds like a little bit joking, and I've joked around with a few people on Twitter about this, but my 2 favorite players on this team are Holiday and Felicio. And I really wanted to know, do I like them so much because the rest of the Bulls players have set my expectations so low that these guys that should be part of the bench mob, the back end of the bench mob, are 2 of my favorite players on the current team? Or is it that these guys play so hard, shut their mouth and just play? No excuses. They don't say what they need to do. They just go out and do what they can. I like these 2 a lot, and I hope that the Bulls are able to keep them around to be part of the building block for what they're going to do next year. And you have another situation where Bulls players and Coach Hoiberg are saying, oh, we had a good spirited practice. We had a great practice. And I don't know what happened in the game. I don't care what the practice is like. Your practice is like you're practicing against other people that just don't care. If Jimmy is going against Derek, neither one of them care. General Soreness Rose, he's waiting for his next contract. Jimmy is, I don't know if it's a nagging injury. He just doesn't like playing with Hoiberg, or I don't know what the situation with him, but he's just not playing well either. And then you have those 2 having a pissing match about calling each other out about their off-season training regimens, and, well, they should train with me. Well, I'm not going to train with him. I don't care what either one of you do, but you know what? You're both on this team. You both need to shut up and play play together. And I don't care if you work out together. I don't care if you even like each other, but go out there and do your jobs. As Thibodeau would say, do your job. And it's hilarious is I actually saw I got a feedback on YouTube. It was, why do I hate Derrick Rose? And it's funny because looking back on some of the shows and some of the things we say about the Bulls, it probably does sound like I hate Derrick Rose. I really don't hate Derrick Rose. I'm extremely, what's the right word? Disappointed in Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose came in this team as a Chicago home guy. He's a Bulls fan growing up, grew up in Inglewood, not that far from the stadium, goes on to win an MVP, gives everybody hope, and then the minute that there's adversity on this in his part and on the team's part, it's he withers away. He's not that guy. Like if you listen to Kyle Schwarber just had an awful injury, not too much different than what Derrick Rose had. And you listen to the things he said, and he's like 23 years old, and he's saying, you know what, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to be faster and stronger and better, and I'm going to do everything in my power to help my team while I'm injured, anything I can do, and I'm going to come back next year to help them on the field. He's saying all the right things. Derrick doesn't do that. So part of it is Derrick is just, he's not, I don't want to say media savvy is not the right term, because he's in his own world, and I don't know if it's all his people that he has around him that make him oblivious to what everyone thinks about him, or if it's just he just doesn't care. But he says everything he says is the wrong thing. That's what it seems like. He's always talking about his next contract. He's always talking about him first rather than the team, or long-term health issues. But he's so quick to take from the team and from the fans and from the Chicagoans, but he's not quick to give back. It's very disappointing, and I know he's got to live the rest of his life with his body, but he's also going to be able to live comfortably with the amount of money he's made from playing this game. And I would gladly maybe have, I don't know, a little bit of a limp or a soreness when I get out of bed in the morning, or have to do stretching and things like that to later in life to be able to do my normal routine, if it meant that I had $100 million in the bank. I don't know about you guys. It's a lot of money. So I don't hate Derrick Rose. I'm just disappointed in him. This should have gone a lot differently with him having him in this organization. And it's sad to see him get beat by Michael Beasley, and you think, what if? What else? Yeah, I'm curious of what's going through the minds of Jerry Reinsdorf, what's going through the minds of Gar and Pax, and what they're thinking, what the brass is thinking of what's going to happen. And I really want to know what's going on with season tickets. Is the season ticket renewals going to be coming? And I bet we are going to have so many people decline their season tickets because what for? Why would you want to go to and watch just a team half-ass it and get blown out and give up 100 points night in and night out? Why would you want to pay to see that? I bet there's going to be a sharp decline in what was consistently one of, if not the biggest selling teams in the NBA as far as ticket sales. I think they're going to have a huge decline in their season ticket renewals. And what's that going to mean as far as how this team proceeds? Are they going to keep on the same path once they see that it's affecting their fan base? Because it's one thing to say, well, we're going to stay the course and we believe in what we're doing and blah, 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 when the fans keep showing up every night. But when the fans stop showing up, does it suddenly put the immediate brake on? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see, and I just this team. I hope they don't make the playoffs, because if there's by some small chance there's this miracle, and they are able to make the playoffs through winning every single one of their games, and Indiana having just an epic collapse, somehow everybody's going to see this as justified. Well, what we did was justified because we made the playoffs. You made the playoffs in a terrible, weak Eastern Conference when you were expected to be, this was supposed to be the team and the coach that you put together to beat LeBron James and go to the finals and get your chance to lose to either San Antonio or Golden State. And you're just sitting there going, fingers crossed, hopefully we can get in the playoffs. Hopefully. There's only a couple games left, and you're hoping. It's not going to happen. This team is going to get a lottery pick. Let's just hope that they have better luck winning that draft lottery than they do in playing games. That's my only hope. I want to move on to the Blackhawks. The regular season's wrapped up. We know who the Blackhawks are going to play. They're going to be on the road versus St. Louis. So St. Louis is going to have home ice advantage for the playoffs, in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and it's going to be first round Blackhawks Blues, which it's got to be a scary proposition. That came right down to the end. It could have been, if something would have turned out slightly different on that this last game of the season, it could have been the Bulls or the Blackhawks playing Dallas in the regular or in the first round of the playoffs. Neither one of those is a good matchup. Both those teams had over 100 points. Both teams are able to light it up. Both teams are just very, very good, well-rounded teams. And with a Blackhawks team that's so up and down, I don't know if those are the two teams that you want to see. You're hoping for a Nashville, somebody that you can ease into the playoffs with, not having to jump in 2 feet and fighting for your life right off the bat. I mean, granted, they won, 5 of the last 7 games they played. They're playing a little bit better going into it, but this is still a Jekyll and Hyde team. Your second line is back to being on fire, and between Kane and Panarin, they've scored like 32% of your total team points. That's kind of impressive on one hand, but it's kind of scary on the other, because those are two guys that you can take away space and they get eaten up. It's not like some of the other stars in the league that are bigger that can handle being banged up on and leaned in on, and they can still fight through it and score points. It's those two guys are little guys. So you get worried what's going to happen in the playoffs when teams are going to play so physical with them. The situation that was creeping up finally crept up, and you had Panarin reach the milestone he needed in his contract, where he's going to have a $1.7 million bonus payment that's due, and that's really going to affect how the Blackhawks proceed with free agency. I think it almost assuredly is going to be that Andrew Shaw is not going to be a Blackhawk come next season. He's not a superstar, but he's been a guy that's done so many things that you've needed him to do. He's been a spark. He's been a gnat to the other team. He's come up big when you need him to come up big. And he's not going to play for another $1.5 million. He's going to be a guy that's going to want bigger money, and he's going to be gone. He's going to go to somebody else that can afford to pay him. Hopefully it doesn't come back to bite them. The penalty kill has been so much better with Marcus Kruger back in. I don't know if that's just coincidence or if Marcus Kruger being back is just that much better in the penalty kill. What else? We had a couple of minor league signings. We had Ryan Mott, who was a draft pick of the Blackhawks, who was phenomenal with the University of Michigan. decided to forego his senior season, and he's going to be joining the Rockford Ice Hogs. And he's coming on for the last few games of this season as on a quote tryout basis, on a tryout contract. But then he signed a contract starting next year. That'll be his entry level contract. Then you need Robin Norrell, who was the another draft pick that they signed that'll be starting a contract as well. What else? With having Shaw injured and you having Hossa injured, the Blackhawks decided to bring up Brian Bickle. In his first game back, he got the quote okay from Coach Quenneville. Got the okay. Played 9 minutes. Had 0 shots in the Corsi plus-minus system, which is how many shots were generated while you were on the ice versus how many shots that were attempted against you. He was a -8. In 9 minutes, he was a -8. And the other night in the bad loss, they had their only goal was on 4-on-4, and they looked really lethargic. The only 2 players on the entire team that were a plus in the Corsi plus minus were Panarin and Gustafsson. So this is a team, and this is a team that just gave up a 3-goal lead to Columbus in the last game of the season. And granted, you had Crawford back in the goal for the first time in however many weeks, and it didn't matter anyway. You were playing on the road, and it didn't affect your seeding at all. You were going to be the same seed no matter what. It's just disheartening. You really want to see this team come out and start to play with a little bit of fire and passion. It makes me a little bit afraid is that they're playing such a good team in that first round that it's going to be like the year after they won the first Stanley Cup. The next playoffs, they just sort of fizzled out. And I have a feeling that this could realistically happen where they're playing a really good St. Louis team. It's a team that doesn't have that fear of the Blackhawks like Nashville does. Nashville just withers away against the Blackhawks. And I have a feeling that I don't care that they got swept by the Minnesota Wild in the regular season. I'm very certain that had the Blackhawks gotten a chance to play the Wild in the first round of the playoffs, that the Blackhawks would have smoked them right out. Probably won all but maybe won one of those games, if not swept them. Because the Minnesota Wild have a sort of fear of the Blackhawks, and St. Louis doesn't have. Dallas doesn't have. These teams are going to be coming after the Blackhawks, and they're going to be up on them because they know, A, they want to go on to that second round of the playoffs. B, they know that the Blackhawks are just they're the defending champions. They're the team to beat, and until you beat the champs, that they're still the champs. So these teams are going to come out and they're just going to play so much harder than they would against anybody else. They're just going to throw everything they have against the Blackhawks because that's the only way to win is you have to go through the Blackhawks. If you're St. Louis, you've got to throw everything you have. And I know it's, you'd have to, if they were playing, the Wild in the first round, if St. Louis would have to play Minnesota in the first round, they'd still have to get through them to win a cup. But it's a different mentality when you're going up against a team that's so star-studded like the Blackhawks, that's had so much success over the last few years as the Blackhawks, has ended their playoff run so many times like the Blackhawks, and is the reigning Stanley Cup champion like the Blackhawks. When you're St. Louis and you've got them pinned back as much as possible, you've just got to, taste blood and go for it. And I think that this St. Louis team is talented enough and physical enough that they can do it. And it makes me worried a little bit for the Blackhawks. It's gonna be a tough run. And here's how the playoffs are going to go for the Blackhawks is First round, like we've been talking about, they've got St. Louis, which is going to be a really tough matchup. Then they have to go on the road and play most likely the Dallas Stars, who've been the best team in the Western Conference all year long. Go on and play them. Then after that, probably play the winner of the Kings and whoever wins versus Sharks versus the Ducks, which is going to be a really disgustingly good first round matchup. I think it's probably going to be LA. So if you have to go through St. Louis, Dallas, and LA to go on to play the whoever you play from the Eastern Conference, that is such a tough run for the Blackhawks. There's no ease in it all through the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'm not predicting this. I'm gonna come tomorrow. If you go on the website swerskisports.com, you'll see what my bracket prediction is. But I don't see the Blackhawks making this run. They've got the talent. They just haven't been able to put it together. And they've just got too many injuries, and they peaked at the wrong time. Hopefully I'm wrong, and I'm still going to be watching every game and rooting them on, but I just don't know if they have it. And last but certainly not least, I'm going to talk about the NFL draft. There's not much Bears news to talk about. There's been really quiet on the free agent signings, and that usually happens about now. The last wave of free agency will probably be after the NFL draft, when you see what holes you filled with your draft picks and who else you can fill with the lower cost free agents. So there's not much on the Bears news per se. But what we will do is talk about the draft. And if you're not familiar with this show, what we do is basically from Super Bowl till roughly just before the NFL draft is we take one position every week and talk about a bunch of the top players at each individual position. So we've gone through pretty much every position, and this week we are on the defensive end / 3-4 outside linebackers, basically the edge rushers. And if you do follow the show every week, as I know we've been saying the last week before the draft, we would do the 4-3 outside linebackers. But I've been thinking about it, and I think I'm going to nix that just because the Bears don't run a 4-3 anymore, and I don't think any of those guys are going to get drafted. If there's somebody you want to hear about, I'm more than happy to go back and watch them, but this is pretty time-consuming, so I think I'm going to end it with this one last position, and that's the edge rushers. So let's just jump right in. As the first one I want to talk about is Joey Bosa, 6'5", 269 pounds, out of Ohio State. And I've heard so much about Joey Bosa, and I've watched some Ohio State games and such, but when you watch a game for fun versus breaking down and watching a player individually, it's a lot different. So what I do when I watch these guys, I watch every single snap that they're on the field, and I only watch what they're doing. I don't care what else happens. I just watch what the player I'm watching for is doing. And Joey Bosa, he uses his hands really well to keep blockers off of him, sheds blocks really well to stop the run, so he'll shed the block and to make the tackle. He's a really high motor guy. But other than his edge move where he goes around the offensive tackle, he doesn't really have any other moves that he does. No swim move, no spin move. He doesn't really do any of these things. It's just really just going around the edge or shed the block and cut inside. He plays a little bit like a slower Clay Matthews, but without Clay Matthews he's so physically strong. He's got some good moves, and he can get to the quarterback. Joey Bosa just doesn't scream top 10 pick to me. I'm going to pass on him. And I know so many other teams are coveting him. I'm not going to jump based on what everyone else is doing. If I'm the general manager of the Bears, I pass on him. If he falls to me in the second round or late, if he's late in the first round, maybe I move up to get him, because he does have a high ceiling. He just has some question marks on him right now. Next is Leonard Floyd, who's a guy that a lot of mock drafts have tied to the Chicago Bears. And Leonard Floyd, 6'6", 244 pounds, out of Georgia. He is extremely athletic. He played defensive end and even dropped into coverage as a cornerback in several games. He's quick. He's super fast for a defensive end, but he is built like a wide receiver. Really is. If you look at him, if you didn't see the name on the back of his jersey, and you saw him standing with the wide receivers, you'd think he was a wide receiver. He's got twig limbs. Again, I'm not taking him with a top draft pick. I think he's too big of a question mark. He's got the tools to be a good edge rusher, but I just don't know if he's big enough, strong enough to play that position in the NFL. Next is Emmanuel Agba from Oklahoma State, 6'4", 273. He's got an NFL-ready body. Really strong, athletic enough to play outside linebacker, but stout enough to play defensive end in a 4-3. But he lacks some sophistication in his pass rush moves. Very, very raw. And he lacks that elite off the snap explosion. Unlike some of the other ones I've been looking at, I actually think he projects really well. He's a really hard-working guy. I think he's got the motor and the will and the talent to be able to succeed. But he, again, he's still raw. Then there's the next two players are from Clemson. So there's Kevin Dodd, 6'5", 277 out of Clemson. Large guy, big man, has quickness off the ball and has some really nice power to him. Not really athletic though, tends to run himself out of plays. Not a lot of moves besides powering inside or using outside speed. The thing with him is you can't teach size and you can't teach speed, but you can teach more moves. I would take a chance on him. Maybe not where the Bears are drafting first, but if they were to trade back in the draft or he falls a little bit, maybe move up from the second round to get him, I think Kevin Dodd could be pretty good. Next is Shaq Lawson. Shaq Lawson, 6'2", 269. Very athletic for his size, powerful, good football IQ. Commanded a lot of double teams, which helped Kevin Dodd a lot. A bit short at 6'2". Mostly uses speed and power to get to the quarterback. Basically, he reminds me a lot of Pernell McPhee. Good, bad, or the otherwise. And then the last two I want to talk about are Noah Spence, 6'2", 254 out of Eastern Kentucky. Really good college production, 5-star recruit, smooth athlete, gets up the field quickly, but he was booted from Ohio State for drug abuse, had several scuffles during the Senior Bowl week, and needs more power. Talent-wise, I would take him over all of the other edge rushers, but he's got a history of addiction and a volatile temper that worry me, and he still has work to go. If he was a polished piece and those were his problems, you take a chance, but he still has some work to go. The last guy is Shalik Calhoun, 6'4", 251 out of Michigan State. Quick off the snap, long frame, really good use of his hands, improved a lot from an already good junior season. But he stands upright too much. You can watch is when he loses that leverage and stands up, he basically gives up on the play. He's done. And he lacks a lot of power. But honestly, I think he's got the talent to succeed in the NFL. He's going to need to put in the work because he needs to get a lot stronger in both his upper and lower body. But I think he's got the ability to do it. And with that, I will go through, every week I also go through a mock draft. So quickly, I'm going to go through this week's mock draft. I use a website called firstpick.com, and it simulates all the other picks. So as you're going through, it'll use a ranking system and team needs to pick for the other teams. And so it's a little bit more realistic than if I were to mock everybody myself. So first pick, with the first round pick, I have the Bears taking Shaq Lawson. And basically in the situation where I did my mock, is Ryan Pace would be in a tough situation because Goff, Wentz, Tunsil, Stanley, Ramsey, and Buckner are all off the board. So it's like a worst case scenario for the Bears. But you make do with what you got. Shaq Lawson is a lot like Pernell McPhee. So he's already your best defensive player. And if you can't trade out of there, you take the next best available player. Second round, I have Connor Cook. Let's face it, the Bears need a long-term answer at quarterback, and they've got an old quarterback who makes a lot of money. Connor Cook makes sense. Third round, I have Carl Joseph. He's got an injury history with a season-ending knee injury. That's the bad news, but he's like a human missile as far as his hits. So Carl Joseph out of West Virginia at safety in the third round. Fourth round, I have Braylon Addison, wide receiver out of Oregon. He's very, very quick, and again, he's another guy with a knee injury, but he could be a really great slot receiver, especially once Eddie Royal gets hurt again this season. Fourth round, I have CJ Prosise, running back out of Notre Dame. I think for a guy that switched positions, he's still got a little bit of kink in his form, but he's a really good runner, and he would be a perfect fit for this three-headed monster of the Bears. Fifth round, I have Bryce Williams, tight end out of East Carolina. He reminds me a lot of he's basically a poor man's Greg Olsen, where he can't block, but he can catch. So we'll see how that pans out. Sixth round, I have Daryl Worley, cornerback out of West Virginia. He's got great size and great ability to be a corner. He's just not a good tackler, but you can learn to be a tackler. The second sixth round pick, I have DJ Reader, defensive tackle out of Clemson. He is an athletic guy that's big. He can play a 3 technique, but he can also be probably a defensive end in a 3-4 system like the Bears. He had a really great Senior Bowl week, but for a guy as athletic and as good as he is, he didn't have a great production at Clemson. And then with the 7th round pick, I have Russell Kaveri Russell out of Notre Dame. He's cornerback. He was pretty much a day one starter for Notre Dame, and then he got booted from the university. It's going to cost him a lot of rounds. He was probably a late second, early third round draft pick talent-wise. He's going to fall to the 7th round, maybe even undrafted. I think it's worth taking a risk at him because he stepped right in and was a day one starter. So that's it for this mock draft. That's going to do it for our coverage of the players in there, unless you guys have somebody you want me to cover. So anybody that I haven't talked about and you want me to talk about, let me know. I'll watch the film and I'll give you my honest opinion. And then starting next week, we'll have a really in-depth talk about what the rumors are in the draft and who realistically will be available for the Bears and who they would like. And hopefully we're talking about some more Cubs wins, Sox wins, and Blackhawks winning in the first round. Thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like Denver New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down